Today we have a very special list because whether we like it or not, diesel cars have been a key part and the absolute stars of at least the first decade of this century and much of the end of the previous century. But certainly in recent years, they have reached impressive levels of development and performance just before everything changed. Only the anti-pollution regulations have slightly altered the perception we have behind the wheel regarding the relationship between performance and consumption. But today, I'd like to talk about some cars I've driven and which diesel models seem to me the best and most impressive over the last 20 years. Some of them you can still find in the second-hand market. So without further ado, let's dive into what, in my opinion, are the 10 best diesel vehicles of the last 20 years. Always keeping in mind factors such as fuel consumption, performance, or a mix of both. These are 10 engines that can be found in many cars, which is why it's a ranking. Anyway, I'll introduce them to you one by one, but the order doesn't matter. The first one I want to talk about is one that, unless you're a big follower of car news, you probably don't even know about. It's super exclusive and very hard to find with this engine, but it really existed. And it's a very curious and interesting story because in a way, it was the first time a sports division of a brand developed a diesel engine specifically. I'm talking about none other than the Mercedes-Benz C30 Tian. The ENG engine, which was fitted in all versions of the Mercedes C-Class, the Sport Coupe, the Sedan, and the Estate, but naturally is shown the most in the Sport Coupe version. We're talking about a 5-cylinder diesel engine, a heavily reworked version of the traditional Mercedes 270 ST. In other words, as I said, a 5-cylinder engine that in this case was boosted to 231 horsepower and a whopping 540 Nm of torque. This was a record-breaking engine, not only for its power and torque, but specifically because the mean effective pressure inside the cylinder reached up to 2300 kPa, which was unheard of. The 150 ft engines, which I'll talk about soon, reached around 2100 kPa. As I said, the 231 HP version of this engine in the Sport Coupe could accelerate from 0 to 100 km/h in 6.8 seconds. This was all happening in 2003, and this engine became the first to power a Mercedes sports car and also a premium brand car. Other brands tried to imitate it later, though not with much success. Breaking the 7-second barrier from 0 to 100 km/h was an impressive achievement back then. Later, with the impressive technological developments and 6, 8, and even 12-cylinder engines, the time was reduced to under 5 seconds, but at the time it was a milestone. So what was this car competing against? Well, it was competing with a sales success. This car was limited in sales, but one that was sold in huge numbers and that I have a lot of affection for is the second car I want to talk about. The 3.0 inline 6 engine from BM, specifically the BM 330D E46. It was launched in Spain around 2004. It's one of the cars I remember most fondly and had the most fun driving. It's one of those cars you can drive hard and have fun with. Despite the added weight, managed to keep a good balance. The front suspension was even a bit stiffer than the petrol 330F version, and it had an impressive performance to consumption ratio. Now, for the third car, I want to talk about the T engines, which without a doubt have a significant place in automotive history. We would have to go back to the 90s to start talking about TDIs, but I want to specifically mention the legendary Volkswagen Group TDIs, first the T90, then the T110, T130, T150, and even T160. In my opinion, the most balanced of all was probably the T110 or T130. And if we consider price alongside performance and fuel consumption, without a doubt, the T90 HEP was the best of those early TDIs. Seat also had the chance to experiment with the Cupra, with the Ibiza Cupra, making a 1.9 engine with 160 HP. Back in those days, people said, that T130 won't last, it'll blow up. And then 150 HEP. They're crazy, and then came the 160 FT, which when tested on dynamometers by car magazines of that time, produced as much as 186 HEP. Back then, we knew well that press cars were often fine-tuned to deliver higher power figures than regular models, and the TDIs had some crazy numbers, especially in press units. The Ibiza T, for instance, gave 186 HEP and no less than 400 Nm of torque on the test bench. These were times when brands could afford to push engines hard as emissions regulations weren't as stringent. If I had to pick one TD, though Volkswagen later experimented with twin-turbo TDIs over 200 HEP, nothing beats the balance of the 100 HEP T. If I had to choose from the early era, I'd probably go with the Audi A3 T130. Anyone who has owned one of these engines knows how well they ran, how reliable and satisfying they were. If you stick around until the end of the video, and I kindly ask you to subscribe, I'll share something that's going to happen in upcoming videos related to these diesel vehicles and engines. Now, let's move on to the fourth place on the list. I want to talk about an engine that surpassed equivalent TDIs at the time, one of the few exceptions on this list that isn't German, though it has everything German except the brand name. I'm talking about Ford and the Ford Mondeo 2.2 TDC with 150 HP. It was a rough, noisy engine, but it packed a punch with its overboost function. It was even faster than equivalent TDIs at the time, delivering spectacular performance in terms of fuel consumption. In fifth place, I want to mention the PSA Peugeot Citroën HD engine, specifically the 2.0 HD with 90 HP. This engine was a real champion of reliability. It was one of those engines that would run forever. With its common rail system, it was efficient and its fuel consumption was extremely low. Many people remember cars like the Peugeot 406 or the Citroën XR Picasso for this reason. The engine was more than enough for everyday driving, and it provided a nice balance between performance and economy. It wasn't the most powerful, but it was a solid choice for anyone looking for a reliable diesel engine. Moreover, this engine was widely used across various models, meaning spare parts were always available and affordable. Sixth place is reserved for another classic. This time it's Volkswagen's 1.9T engine, specifically in the 130 HP version. This engine powered many cars from the Golf to the Passat and even the Audi A3. It offered an excellent balance between performance and consumption. It was so popular that Volkswagen kept refining it for years, adding more power with each iteration. But the 130 HP version was the sweet spot for most drivers. It had enough power to be fun to drive, and it was robust enough to handle high mileage without major issues. Plus, the turbo lag gave the engine a certain character that many people still miss in modern cars. In seventh place, let's talk about the Alfa Romeo 2.4 Jet 5-cylinder engine. This was a very interesting engine. Alfa Romeo, known for its stylish and sporty cars, introduced this diesel engine in the early 2000s, and it was truly impressive. The Alfa 156 and Alfa 159 models with this engine offered a unique driving experience. The engine was smooth and provided a very satisfying growl when revved, thanks to its 5-cylinder configuration. It also had great torque, which made driving through curves and on highways a lot of fun. This engine was another example of how diesel engines, even back then, could deliver enjoyable performance without sacrificing efficiency. In eighth place, we find the Range Rover Sport 3.6 TED V8. When you think of Range Rover, diesel engines might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but the 3.6 TED V8 was a game changer. The engine produced 272 HP and a staggering 640 Nm of torque, which made it one of the most powerful diesel engines available at the time. What made this engine special was its ability to combine luxury off-road capability and brute power in a single package. The torque was perfect for towing and off-road adventures, but it was also a smooth operator on the highway. It was the ultimate diesel engine for those who wanted it all power, luxury, and versatility. Now, for ninth place, I want to highlight another BM. This time, it's the BM 335D with its 3.0-liter straight-six twin-turbo diesel engine. This car was an absolute monster on the road. With 286 HP and a whopping 580 Nm of torque, it could go from 0 to 100 km in just 6 seconds. For a diesel car, this was incredible performance at the time. But the most impressive thing was how seamlessly the power was delivered. Thanks to the twin-turbo setup, the torque was available at almost any RPM, making overtaking effortless and providing a very smooth driving experience. It was a car that blurred the lines between diesel and petrol performance. In many ways, the 335D represented the peak of BMW's diesel engineering. Finally, in 10th place, we have to mention Audi's V6 engines. More specifically, the 3.0 TD6 that powered cars like the Audi A4, A6, and Q7. This engine was known for its refinement, delivering a great balance between performance, fuel consumption, and comfort. It was quiet, especially for diesel, and had enough power to satisfy any driver. The 240 HP version of this engine, which came with 500 Nm of torque, was incredibly efficient. And it was one of the most popular choices for people who wanted a luxury car with good performance and low running costs. This engine was also used in a wide range of Volkswagen Group vehicles, from Audi to Porsche Cayenne, showing how versatile and well regarded it was across the industry. So those are my picks for the top 10 diesel engines of the last 20 years. Each one of these engines left a mark on the industry, not just because of their performance or fuel efficiency, but also for how they represented the evolution of diesel technology during this period. Some of them are no longer available due to stricter emissions or regulations, but their legacy lives on. It's hard to imagine where the diesel engine would have gone if regulations hadn't become so tight. In any case, these engines will be remembered as some of the best of their kind. I hope you enjoyed this list, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe for more car-related content.